Well, good afternoon to you. 407 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up today, John Solomon will join us this hour. We'll talk about all of those pardons for the January 6th political prisoners that President Trump announced yesterday, finally, as promised during the campaign. Promises made, promises kept. John Yoo will be with us as well at 5 o'clock. We talked to him about TikTok, the Chinese Communist Party app, which at the moment, it's on life support here in the United States. We'll discuss. And you can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. President Trump, very busy right now. They've been firing people, which is cool. They've asked for the resignations of a bunch of State Department officials as Marco Rubio cleared Senate confirmation and is now sworn in today. He was sworn in by J.D. Vance, Vice President J.D. Vance, to become the Secretary of State, making him the first cabinet official to get through the Senate process. And a bunch of upper-level State Department officials have already tendered their resignations as requested by the Trump administration, even in advance of Marco Rubio arriving. So that's pretty good. Also, the Commandant of the Coast Guard has been fired, terminated. The Commandant of the U.S. Coast Guard has been terminated over concerns about the border recruitment and an erosion of trust, according to a senior DHS official speaking to Fox News as of this morning. Admiral Linda Lee Fagan, 61 years old, has been terminated by the acting Secretary of Homeland Security, a guy called Benjamin Huffman, the official said. Fagan has demonstrated leadership deficiencies, operational failures, and an inability to advance the strategic objectives of the Coast Guard. So the Commandant of the Coast Guard has been told to pack it up and leave. You are out. So that's the update there. So the firings have already begun. Also, the border efforts have begun. Today, Tom Homan, the border czar, announced that ICE is already beginning to round up illegals and eject them from the country. So let's start with what Tom Homan said as of last night. He was describing this effort and how ICE is going to begin as quickly as possible here to round up illegals and get them out of the country.
Can you talk to us more about the deportations coming tomorrow in sanctuary cities?
Look, the president's been clear that right out of the gate we're going to concentrate on public safety threats and national security threats. So I can't believe that any elected politician, I don't care what party you're from, why would you not want public safety threats out of your communities? I mean, that's your number one responsibility as an elected official, is the protection of communities.
So the deportations are coming tomorrow?
Yeah, ICE is going to start doing their job tomorrow. They haven't been able to do the job for the last 4 years, and now they're going to start enforcing the law like there should be.
In which sanctuary cities?
It's not specific sanctuary cities. They're going to do it throughout the country. I mean, we have officers throughout the country, and every ICE officer is going to be out there enforcing the law starting tomorrow morning.
Every ICE officer is going to be out there enforcing the law starting tomorrow morning. In fact, here's Tom Homan telling Fox's John Roberts today that effort has begun.
Based on your initial schedule, that today roundups of criminal illegal aliens in the process of deporting them would begin. That seems to have been put on hold for a little while. When can we expect that to happen? Where will it begin?
No, it started.
It has started.
ICE teams are out there as of today. We gave them the direction to prioritize public safety threats that we're looking for. So we've been working up the target list. There was some discussion about Chicago because the specific operational plan was released. So we had to look at and reevaluate, does this raise officer safety concerns? And it does. Mm-hmm. But we've addressed that, and teams are out there effective today.
Yeah, there were some people leaking ahead of the ICE raids that some of these would take place in Chicago, a sanctuary city. And Tom Homan was angry about this because he wants to figure out who the heck is leaking. These operations should be secret enough to protect the ICE agents who have to undertake them as they go in there, and especially as they prioritize very dangerous illegal aliens who are here in the country. By the way, illegal alien is the official phrase. It always has been, but the Trump administration, in memos that we're seeing going around online, is already reiterating to the whole administration that's involved in the immigration mission that is the official nomenclature. None of this nonsense about undocumented immigrants or anything like that. It's under the law, illegal aliens in the country. And that's the way federal officials will be talking about this. Also, Tom Homan spoke to Dana Bash of CNN today, and I was asked about this idea that, well, as they're going after the violent people, what if they find just regular old illegal aliens?
Others that don't have a criminal conviction but are in the country illegally, they will be arrested too, because we're not going to strike. And this is the difference between the last administration and this administration. ICE is going to enforce the immigration law. There's nothing in the INA, the Immigration Nationality Act, says you got to be convicted of a serious crime in order to be removed from this country. So there's going to be more collateral arrests in sanctuary cities because they forced us to go in the community and find the guy we're looking for.
That's exactly right. So the sanctuary cities, you asked for this outcome, actually. So you are allowing violent criminals to go back to heavily populated illegal alien communities that are here in the United States. And in so doing, you have basically made it so that federal officials who are going in there to grab the violent guy, well, what happens when they encounter other lawbreakers who are here just breaking the law by being here illegally? What are they supposed to do? The answer? Their jobs. That's what they're supposed to do. Tom Homan says that is back. So if you'd like to protect the nonviolent illegals who are in your community, start by working with ICE and handing the violent guys over to us rather than releasing them from jails and then not telling the feds that you're doing that. Orchestrating a cover-up of their status in the country as they create more chaos in our communities. The Border Patrol's mission is tough. We have unfortunate news in the last 24 hours that a 44-year-old Border Patrol agent was killed in a shootout with armed suspects yesterday, Inauguration Day. His name is David Milland. He's 44 years old. He's a veteran agent. He died after a traffic stop, Fox reports, on Interstate 91 between Newport and Orleans, Vermont. That would be up towards our northern border, around 3:15 p.m. yesterday. About 20 miles south of the U.S.-Canada border, in fact, according to the Department of Homeland Security. Quote, a Border Patrol agent assigned to the U.S. Border Patrol Swanton sector was fatally shot in the line of duty, said the acting DHS Secretary, Benjamin Huffman, in a statement. Every single day, our Border Patrol agents put themselves in harm's way so that Americans in our homeland are safe and secure. The ensuing shootout left Milan and one suspect dead. A second suspect was injured and had been taken into custody, according to the FBI. The suspect's immigration status was not immediately available, this Fox News report says, although I did see some reporting today. Corey, did you see this as well about the suspects? That at least one of them, it looks like, was on a visa overstay, was here in the United States, and was perhaps here on a visa overstay. If that's the case, that would also make that person an illegal alien. You are here illegally if you overstay your visa in the United States. Remote-controlled robots were spotted at the scene examining a backpack and other gear with a suspect's body still visible in the background. Vermont State Police had closed the interstate in both directions near mile marker 168 for hours Monday, eventually reopening only the northbound lane, they explained. The FBI's Albany branch is investigating. So hearts and prayers, our hearts and our prayers go out to this Border Patrol agent's family dealing with the awful, awful situation here of losing their loved one in the line of duty. And this is what these Border Patrol agents face all the time. And you had, up until yesterday, an administration that paid very little attention to the safety situation they were in. In fact, they told Border Patrol agents that you will aid and abet the invasion of our country. They turned them into, tourism agencies for illegal foreign nationals. And that, of course, all changed yesterday as President Trump comes into office with wide popular support on this issue. I mentioned earlier as I was talking to Senator Tuberville that there's been some New York Times polling on where people are politically right now, and they're wildly in favor of Trump's agenda. President Trump has a unique ability to kind of be a little bit more polarizing as a name. So if you ask about him specifically, the country is more evenly divided, although he's got majority support. But when you ask about his policies, they are wildly popular. You just ask about the policies. Leave Trump's name out of it. Deporting illegal aliens, wildly popular. That cuts across all demographics. Deporting violent illegal aliens, it is off the charts how popular that is. Everybody's for that. Get rid of them. Get them out of our country. The same is true when it comes to the gender nonsense. Nobody's for the gender nonsense. Nobody. Democrats, by a wide majority, support keeping men out of women's sports. And I love that you have Democrats that are sitting around scratching their heads. How did the Republicans win? They wonder. And they think it was some sort of messaging failure. That's the explanation they constantly cook up. Well, we just weren't able to censor people enough. Oh, we just weren't able to get our message through enough. Oh, people didn't give us enough credit for making their lives wonderful. That's not it. That's not it. You are completely out of touch with the American voter. You are completely, theatrically, hysterically out of touch with Americans. That's why you lost. And Trump is an expression of how awful you have been and has made a commitment that he will serve all the people. He'll be the president that actually reflects the popular will. Often in politics we talk about populism. What is that? Populism, where you take the temperature of the people and you go with that. And the President Trump very much pays attention to where the American people are. There's no question. He asks every single person he encounters what they think, no matter their station in life. In fact, I want to point to something he did yesterday that I thought was really instructive. First of all, every other president signs executive orders and actions inside of the confines of the Oval Office. A lot of them don't even do it in front of the cameras. It's not for you to see. They'll just do it. Biden didn't do it at all, I don't think. Biden used a robot to sign most of his documents. Did you see these pardons that he put out this week? Did you see this? The pardons have the robot signature because the signature is a carbon copy of the autograph on every single one of the pardons. There's no variance whatsoever. I could hand you a piece of paper and ask you to sign your name 100 times. You're not going to do two signatures the same exact way at any point. Look, I'm close, but it's not going to be picture perfect. Joe Biden, who can barely navigate stairs, producing perfect match signatures for all of these pardons. That's because he didn't sign them. He used what a lot of presidents have used, but this is, I think it's kind of wild. He uses the auto pen. Obama famously had scandals with the auto pen because he'd be in Hawaii and they'd be back at the White House signing documents with the auto pen, which is a robot pen. Does that work? Is that official? I get it. Nowadays it seems like how many documents do you get sent on your computer where they ask you to e-sign it? Like sign it, sign the PDF, use your, and people do. Feels weird. You click sign. You're clicking sign. I'm not actually signing it, but I'm doing an e-sign. Okay. But it does take a headache away. I do feel like it's on another level, though, if you're the president of the United States. Can't you bring yourself to actually sign a document? Biden couldn't. Also, did they sign those pardons for his family members and everybody else? Did they sign them while he was at the inauguration? Does that even count? Because even when I e-sign, I'm the one e-signing. I'm the one who's doing the physical action of clicking the mouse. Biden wasn't there, so what was going on with that? So, that's kind of the way things ended. The Biden administration with the auto signatures. Trump did all the signatures himself. So yesterday, I talk about kind of the differences between these administrations. One, while he was in the Oval Office, he had the cameras there, he had reporters there, he was taking their questions, he was answering them, he was treating the American people like they were adults, like they deserved to be a part of this process, like they were voters, like they had some say in how this system is supposed to run. And then when he signed executive actions at the Capital One Arena yesterday, did you witness this? He had his big black Sharpie markers, and yes, those are actually made. Those markers that you see him sign with are actually made by the Sharpie company. The Sharpie company. I was just talking to a coworker earlier about this and having this discussion. And you know that President Trump had found out that traditional pens that presidents use to sign documents are absurdly expensive. They get these really nice pens, these commemorative pens, and then they'll sign documents, and they pay a fortune for the pens. They pay a lot. Your money that they're spending on commemorative pens that they hand out to senators and things. Trump ended that practice for his administration, both the first and now the second. You know what he did? He arranged a deal with Sharpie that they would produce their very cheap markers in a custom format, these thick black Sharpies, and on the side of them, they have a golden signature, Donald J. Trump. It's the same as his signature, but it's signed right on the side of these markers. And Trump yesterday, in signing these executive orders, each one, he got a different marker. Sign them. Sign them. And then at the end, after all of the executive orders were signed, you know what he did with the markers? He didn't hand them to U.S. senators. He didn't hand them to governors. He didn't hand them to donors. He began chucking them into the crowd at the Capital One Arena. 20,000 people who waited in absolutely abysmal temperatures for long hours to get into that building. And then after they got there, they waited for hours after he was inaugurated just for him to get there so they could spend a little bit of time with the president that they put back in the Oval Office. And when he was done signing those executive orders, he took those markers and he launched them into the crowd. This guy's different. This guy's different. And it's obvious why he was elected again. It is obvious. And the left is wondering why. The left still wonders why. How did it happen? How did he pull it off? Watch him. All right, coming up, we await more breaking news from President Trump, and John Solomon will join us in just moments to talk about all of those pardons for the January 6th political prisoners. Hey, good afternoon to you. 4:35 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we are making sense of the news. Coming up on the program, we'll talk to law professor, former Deputy Assistant Attorney General John Yoo at 5 o'clock. About that Chinese Communist Party app, TikTok, and its presence in the United States of America. How much longer might it be here? And you can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. The President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, signing a bunch of executive orders, actions last night in the Oval Office. One of the big ones that stood out to me is the promise that he made to pardon all of the January 6th hostages, in his words, and he fulfilled it yesterday.
So this is January 6th. These are the hostages, approximately 1,500 for a pardon.
Yes.
Full pardon.
Full pardon or commutations?
Full pardon.
Full pardon, a handful of commutations among the group. But over 1,500 such pardons, which has led to a lot of joy. And certainly some people were getting out of the jails last night in celebration. Not clear yet if everybody's out, but the push is on to get them all free. Joining us now with more reaction information about all of this, John Solomon is here. He's an award-winning investigative journalist and the founder of Just the News. John, good to have you back with us.
Yeah, great to be with you.
So this is the promise that he made during the campaign. Voters chose him on this basis, and he delivered yesterday. What do you think?
He did. He delivered quickly and sweepingly. I think there's a large number of people that were affected by these pardons. And it has to be viewed in tandem with what happened just a few hours before that, when Joe Biden felt it incumbent upon himself, not just to pardon his family preemptively, but to pardon an entire congressional institution, a full committee of the House of Representatives under Democratic leadership of Benny Thompson and the Republican sort of turncoat Liz Cheney. That entire committee, the lawmakers and their staffs, were pardoned in preemption. You have to ask yourself, if the January 6th committee did something so bad it needed clemency, should America rely on its findings? Because its findings drove some of those prosecutions that people were pardoned for yesterday. Its findings drove some of the narrative that people made decisions on in the election in 2022 and 2024. And I think this January 6th story is not yet complete. I think you're going to, all right, we saw the pardons of the committee, then we saw the pardons of the defendants. I think the last chapter may be a decision by Mike Johnson and the U.S. House of Representatives to vote and say, for contemporary times, Americans today, and for history, the findings and the conclusions of the December 2022 report issued by the Democrat-run January 6th committee should not be relied upon. They are flawed. They're factually inaccurate.
Yes.
They withheld it. I think that's going to be the final chapter from what started yesterday morning with Biden, ended with Trump last night. I think in a few days, Congress does that next thing.
Yes, that committee produced a work of selectively edited fiction, and it doesn't actually represent an accurate accounting of the events of that day. In fact, they went out of their way to exclude a lot of exculpatory information, to include President Trump's own statements to the crowd that assembled that day on January 6th. you know, the president talks a lot, John Solomon, about the fact that the committee also destroyed much of the so-called evidence that it had gathered. What do we know about that in terms of what has not been made available to the public or has been destroyed or kept from us?
Well, we know some of it was ultimately located. We found that some of the transcripts that were missing for long periods of time and kept from the Republicans when they took over in 2023, they've been located, but the video has not been located. Why is that important? You can tell so much from a videotape deposition that you can't necessarily tell from a transcript. Was the person uncomfortable? Was the word said as a declarative sentence or a question? And so for months now, Barry Loudermilk has tried to find those videotape depositions of people like Cassidy Hutchinson, who, so much of the hearings back in 2022 turned on. She's the one who told the REO Speedwagon story. I heard it from a friend, who heard it from a friend, who heard it from another friend, that Donald Trump tried to commandeer the limousine. That didn't happen. When you finally heard it from the agents, it didn't happen. But how did that story come to be, and what happened during the deposition that led to that? Those are very important things. Those videotapes are unaccounted for.
Yes.
They're soon to be destroyed, but we don't know for sure.
Also, do we even know the full roster of witnesses who spoke to the committee? And the reason I'm asking this question, especially today, is because as one of his outgoing acts, Joe Biden pardoned all of the police officers, law enforcement officials who testified to the January 6th committee. And there is some open question, as far as I'm aware, of whether or not Michael Byrd, the Capitol Police officer who shot and killed Ashley Babbitt, whether or not he ever testified to the committee. He's not listed on any public registry. Do you know anything about whether or not he testified to that committee?
We do not know at this point whether he testified. The records that are in the public domain and the ones that Barry Loudermilk has talked about does not mention a interview with the committee. Now, we know the committee was regularly assisting him because we broke these stories a few months ago where you see the Democrats going out of their way to try to get him more money and to get him a shotgun when he failed the background check, to do other things. So the Democrats were in constant contact with him. Did he actually consent to an interview? Not that we know of, but we're trying to get that answer today.
If you didn't interview Michael Byrd as a part of your January 6th committee, doesn't that suggest that your entire enterprise is fraudulent? Wouldn't he be a centerpiece of in terms of as a witness to what took place that day?
If you were trying to figure out all the events that happened, one of the most critical events was a lethal shooting. You think you would, right? You wouldn't just rely on the internal affairs report. But in this case, it appears that at least right now, we don't know of an interview that was done officially by the Democrat committee. And that there's so many other places. Listen, we now know after months and years of being told it was a lie to think that Donald Trump offered the January 6th, the Capitol, the National Guard in advance. And in fact, he did 4 days in advance, by the way. The documents I got from the Capitol Police after a lot of work showed that they offered him on January 2nd, and then they were turned down on January 3rd. And then we heard, Nancy Pelosi, I didn't know anything about the National Guard. Her own videotape taken by her own daughter, she's fleeing the Capitol that day, says, we bear the responsibility for what happened today. We should have had the National Guard here. Wait a second. Yeah. I thought Nancy Pelosi told us she had no say over that. She clearly admitted in that video she did. We all knew that. Common sense told us she had a say over it. But all those things were left out of the report, along with many security flaws, many intelligence failures. Why were there 34 federal informants sitting in the crowd? Why was the FBI having so many people in the crowd that day? That is going to be the next round of investigation if Mike Johnson allows it to go forward.
Do you expect that the pardons we've seen in the last 24 hours from President Trump will be his final round of pardons in maybe the weeks ahead? And one area that I think could be ripe for more clemency is all of the pro-lifers, especially Christians, who were attacked by the Biden administration for supposed FACE Act violations over the last few years. Is it possible that President Trump is going to step up and offer some pardons to those people?
It's under consideration, hasn't been decided yet, but I think he hinted yesterday, this is the beginning, not the end of pardons, and so I think we'll see more. The abortion activists seem like a natural next step, particularly given that the president has put so much emphasis on the fact that we have blocked political discourse, blocked political debate in this country, censored Americans from talking. The censorship order yesterday was a sweeping and historic document. Declaration that federal agencies and any of their contractors and subcontractors can't do anything to restrict our free speech. Now, we used to think we had that protection. We found out we didn't. But that order is historic. It would be a natural progression to go from that order and his defense of the First Amendment to saying these people peacefully were acting on their conscience as pro-life activists, and maybe they don't belong in prison.
So, I mean, I think it's important, and you mentioned it at the outset, that it's important to understand all of this in context because, President Trump is not declaring that no laws were violated, for instance, by January 6 people. That's not the declaration he's making.
Nope.
He is declaring that we have a deep imbalance in our system of justice and that he's using this presidential power as a way to redress that. Do I have that right?
Yeah, Vince, you're exactly right. Listen, he knows that when you strike an officer or when you invade, go into a building where you're not supposed to be, that's trespassing. But the punishment and the pursuit of these individuals far surpassed what we saw to people who did similar things during the summer of 2022 BLM riots, and they didn't get any punishment. So the unequal system of justice is really what he's trying to fix, not to exonerate every action taken on January 6th or the mistakes that people made that day or the criminal acts they committed, but rather to say one side got treated far differently than the other. Lady Justice was not blind in this case. These people were persecuted because they supported Trump. And I want to make a correction, and I want to make a fix on that. And that's really what last night's pardons were about.
And then, what is the status of all of the left-wingers who've performed acts of violence and obviously breaking the law over these past years? I remember the 2017 inauguration of President Trump. There was riots in the streets of D.C., including a burning of a limousine out in front of the Washington Post. And,
that's right.
Lots of people were arrested. A couple of charges were brought, and then eventually everything was dropped in D.C., and everyone was told to go on their merry way. We saw the siege on the White House while President Trump was in office in the summer of 2020. We saw, like the firebombing of crisis pregnancy centers and defacing of crisis pregnancy centers during the Biden administration. Do any of those things ever get meaningfully charged or resolved?
We'll see, right? To be determined. The Justice Department has a lot on its plate, just getting rid of the very dangerous criminal alien gangs and criminal aliens who are committing crime in this country or have already committed crime in this country. I think that's going to be a higher priority. But you saw yesterday some long delayed accountability for somebody that we all now know were telling us a bogus story, put their thumb on the scale of the 2020 election. Those 51 so-called intelligence experts who signed a letter saying the Hunter Biden laptop was Russian disinformation when in fact the FBI knew it was real. They lost their security clearances. They lost a capability to make money in the private sector, a very consequential act by President Trump. So he is going backward and meting out accountability, even though he's focused on leaning forward to the crises that currently affect us. But I think you'll see more of that. Keep in mind the Biden family and other people who might have gotten pardons recently, they are exonerated from criminal prosecution for past acts, but they still could face civil action. They still could be brought before a grand jury and compelled to testify. Yeah. The right against self-incrimination eliminated. You could see a Texas or a Florida or another red state prosecute some of these people under state law. As you saw, Steve Bannon was pardoned on federal, but he got taken on in state. Donald Trump wasn't charged under federal law in the hush money case, but he got charged in the state. So there are still other places for accountability to be meted. Not all of it has to come from the Trump administration. Civil lawsuits, state actions. I think there'll be more of that to balance the picture and create a more equal system of justice, but it won't all flow from Trump.
And, when we were coming into yesterday, John Solomon, we were told that we were to expect some 200 plus executive actions out of President Trump yesterday. I saw a lot of executive actions, but I don't know if I've seen 200 yet. Do you expect more in the days ahead?
Yeah, I think I've been told that the total number of documents is somewhere between 150 and 200 right now in terms of just total things signed. Now, those aren't all executive orders.
Got it.
There are lots of things you have to sign in addition to executive orders, memorandum, instructions to agencies. But there's a large number. He was signing all through the night, and I think more will have effect. Some of the documents he signed is a single order that has, or a single document that has 6 or 7 instructions to it, so 6 or 7 different orders covered by a single signature. But the total number of executive actions, not executive orders, is somewhere between 150 and 200, according to the Trump White House that I talked to last night and again this morning.
Got it.
That's a lot in the first day, but the work has hardly begun. There is a lot of work ahead, and I think we were reminded this morning at this morning's prayer breakfast and then when the courts opened that the resistance against Donald Trump is still very real. There are people going to sue because they have legitimate grievances or disputes over ending birthright citizenship and other things. So there's going to be a resistance in the court. We know there are polls saying that there are federal leaders who are going to, in the bureaucracy, they're going to resist the president and not accept his orders. And then we saw at the prayer breakfast, which should have been an ecumenical, nonpartisan moment, a bishop inject politics in a self-denigrating way to President Trump at the prayer breakfast. There's still a resistance out there. And so what felt like a really big, fast, quick day for Donald Trump, and it was, it's still got a lot of turbulence ahead of it to get this agenda through and to check off every box that the American people voted to have checked off.
Yep. And that resistance has a deep contempt for the American voters, Will, unfortunately. Hey,
Yes,
John,
it does.
John Solomon, thank you very much for all of your excellent journalism and your time today, sir.
Yeah.
Okay, so we don't have all of the January 6 detainees released yet. In fact, some of them are still in custody in the D.C. Central Detention Facility, the D.C. jail. Richie McGinniss, our friend, great journalist, is out there literally as we speak. So we just gave him a call. Hey, Richie, sir, what do things look like outside the jail right now?
Hey, Vince, there's one guy who keeps shouting freedom in the Braveheart voice. Other than that, it's pretty quiet. There's a little bit of music playing.
Yeah.
Everybody's really wondering. Rep. Lauren Boebert just came out and said that the U.S. Marshal was dealing with the prisoners, quote, one by one. So that paperwork will have to go through. I guess if it's one by one, we don't really know how long it's going to be, or whether it will be tonight, or everybody thought it would be last night before midnight, and they're still in there. So
yeah, at this moment, every hour that goes by, they're illegally detained in there. They've been given pardons. So is there any indication as to why the D.C. jail is dragging its feet?
Rep. Boebert didn't give any indication beyond what the U.S. Marshal told her, that it's just they were going to deal with it one by one. I guess that means just paperwork, and that's the person who has to sign off on it. But there have been 2 prisoners who were released over the last 24 hours, but they went out the back door.
Uh-huh.
And I'm told by local law enforcement that usually they're released out the front. So I'm also asking the question of, why they're not letting them out the front. Maybe they have their tail between their legs. So I imagine they're going to be dragging their feet as much as they can.
And do you know from where you are how many people who have been affected by pardons are inside of the D.C. jail right now?
I think it's around 20, but that also there's also prisoners in there whose cases haven't been heard yet, and so the question is, the pardon applies to people who are convicted, and so they're the individuals who are in the purgatory of not having been convicted of anything yet. The question is whether they'll be released as well.
Do you know that for a fact, or is it a matter of speculation? So, in other words, people who are pending these trials, were they not subject to pardons?
Well, if you're not, this is just the conversations I was having with a couple of local cops, and technically, I guess if you're pardoned, I'm not exactly sure.
Okay,
I'm not a lawyer. You know that. I have some good lawyers. I can ask them.
Okay, well, good. Well, if you find out any more, of course, fill us in. I'm grateful for your perspective outside that D.C. jail as officials drag their feet. Notice Richie telling us Congresswoman Lauren Boebert there demanding answers. Good for her. Where's
your full comments on Twitter, Vince?
Okay, and you can follow Richie McGinniss on Twitter. He's got a lot of video coming out from there too. Thanks, Richie. I wish more lawmakers. I wish more lawmakers were out there with Richie and Congresswoman Boebert right now. 458.
News Talk 105.9 WMAL.
Making sense of the news.
The passing of another year may remind you of all the things you meant to do but never got around to. The moves you make now could affect your retirement income for many years to come. I'm Abe Abish, founder of Abish Financial Services. Make 2025 the year you stick to your financial resolutions. Join me for the Retirement Key Saturday at 8 a.m. and 2 p.m. and Sunday at 8 a.m., 2 p.m., and 5 p.m. on WMAL. And connect anytime at theretirementkey.com.
Hey, it's Larry from my friends at CoPair Weight Loss, and I'm joined here today by JJ. JJ, why did you decide to come back and try CoPair again?
Yeah, well, I've seen Julie's success, obviously, and Larry, I've seen how you've sustained your weight loss, and I'm thinking about myself, and I've realized now's the time to change my health, and I know CoPair can help me with that.
Well, it's a new year, and you know what they say, new year, new you. We both know that many of you have been listening and thinking about losing weight, just like JJ has. Well, now's the time. Don't procrastinate anymore. CoPair has 2 programs. One program without medication for those who don't need or want to take medicine. And CoPair also has the RX program using GLP-1 meds. This, combined with CoPair's coaching, will have you keep the weight off forever. Call now and make the new year a new you. Tell them Larry and JJ sent you and learn about their Jumpstart January program. Call 855-888-0180 to get started or go to coparehealth.com.
Recently, in a movie theater.
Neil, you're back.
I couldn't be away from you, Brenda.
Kiss me.
Not feeling well here.
There's never a good time to get sick. The Virginia Department of Health reminds you to stay up to date on your flu, RSV, and COVID-19 vaccines.